GreenTV. Today's show is a speech by Vandana Shiva, one of the jewels of the environmental justice movement. Born in India in 1952, Vandana Shiva is a world-renowned environmental leader and thinker. Director of the Research Foundation on Science, Technology, and Ecology, she is the author of many books, including Water Wars, Pollution, Profits, and Privatization, Biopiracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge, Monocultures of the Mind, The Violence of the Green Revolution, and Staying Alive. Shiva is a leader of the International Forum on Globalization along with Ralph Nader and Jeremy Rifkin. She addressed the World Trade Organization Summit in Seattle 1999, as well as the World Economic Forum in Melbourne 2000. In 1993, Shiva won the Alternative Nobel Prize Award, the Right Livelihood Award. The founder of Navdanya, 9 Seeds, a movement promoting diversity and the use of native seeds, she also set up the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology in her mother's cowshed in 1997. Its studies have validated the ecological value of traditional farming and has been instrumental in fighting destructive development projects in India. Before becoming an activist, Shiva was one of India's leading physicists. She holds a master's degree in the philosophy of science and a PhD in particle physics. Time magazine called her an environmental hero. On April the 2nd, 2003, Dr. Shiva spoke at Saddleback College, Mission Viejo, California, about the growing inequalities between first and third world countries. Her speech is titled Artificial Scarcity. She posed these questions and more. What are the responsibilities of first world countries to third world countries? Do we have any responsibilities to the third world? Have our activities contributed in any way to their conditions? Dr. Shiva addresses solutions to create a global democracy and smash economic apartheid. Please join us in examining the issues surrounding corporate power, globalization, economic disparities, international aid, and patent rights.
I want to thank Derek and all his friends in Class Action. And I want to thank you all for being here. And I also want to bring you my personal greetings of peace and love in a time of hate and war. Wars like the one that's being fought always bring two messages. One, of a display of power. And second, a display of deliverance. But as I watch one of the most prosperous countries of the Gulf, Iraq, it was very, very well to do. Nobody was poor in Iraq. Everyone had food, everyone had clothing, everyone had shelter, everyone had education. To have children and women line up for food and water takes me back to my 30 years of work on environmental issues, of how food and water, poverty, are never conditions of the human existence. They're not naturally created conditions. They're not culturally created conditions. Not every society has been designed to create missile bombers. That a few societies can do. Not every society decided to use things like gunpowder for weaponry. After all, gunpowder was a Chinese invention, but was put to war use in Europe. But I don't think there's any society in the world that did not know how to provide food and water to itself. That's something the most ancient civilizations have done, and the ones who've done it best have lasted longest. So if you really want to see an indicator of sustainability, One just has to see who's been able to farm their land the longest. So I'm very proud to come from a country that has farmed its lands for 10,000 years. And the water did not run out, and the food did not run out. And we weren't forced to move. The Indus Valley civilization was forced to move, but in the Gangetic Plain, in other parts of the country, in tribal zones, thousands of years of farming. While I was growing up as a child, I remember one could travel the length and breadth of the country, and even in dry areas, in desert areas, areas with rainfall like California has, which refuses to recognize itself as a desert ecosystem and wants to pretend it's in a rainforest. Everywhere we got water at about 10 feet. And the landscape used to be speckled with these things called Persian wheels, you know, these beautiful bucket things which were drawn by animal energy, or sometimes even by human energy. You don't see a Persian wheel anywhere in the third world anymore because water has shot down from 10 feet, some places to 1,000 feet, some places even 1,000 feet there is no water. I started working on ecological issues in the 70s because of a movement created by women in my region in the Himalayan belt. And this was a movement called Chipko, about hugging trees. But women weren't hugging trees only because they loved them. They were hugging trees because they were the survival base of their economy. And even while I was doing my PhD and doing my quantum physics, I could not be blind to seeing communities who had all the water, all the food, all the fiber, all the fodder, all the fuel, having it disappear because of logging. One commercial activity of logging was creating water scarcity by making streams disappear, which meant women were walking longer for water. They were walking 10 kilometers rather than walking 5 steps. So the water scarcity was not created by nature. It was created by a commercial activity, which tried to turn the forest into a source of profits rather than the forest as a source of sustaining ecosystems and local communities. The destruction of the forests meant the fodder the women collected from the forest started to decline, and therefore the animals declined. When the animals declined, the organic manure declined. When the organic manure declined, the food production declined. And villages which had never experienced food scarcity till the 60s, never ever experienced food scarcity, started to have food deficits. Other ecological instabilities were connected to it. While I was driving home with Tony, you know, I was saying I live in a valley which gets 4,000 millimeters of rain. Just imagine. Yeah? And the image was, we are flooded in water. No, we have no floods. We get 4,000 millimeters of rain, but we didn't have floods till mining and logging started to destroy the aquifers and the storage systems. Once you destroy whatever stores your water, it could be stored in the humus in the forest base. It could be stored in the rocks that are the aquifers. It could be stored in your soils that have enough humus to be able to conserve the moisture. You know, every time I see soil rich in organic matter, I say dam, you know. This is the biggest dam in the world. And then when we've killed that dam in soil, we've then to create these cement dams. I was just thinking, reflecting, you know, if you look at the literature before industrial agriculture, and for us industrial agriculture came in the name of the Green Revolution. It wasn't very green. It was a very bloody revolution. It left 30,000 people dead in Punjab as a result of the total non-sustainability of a high-cost agriculture, artificially subsidized for a while, and then you pull the subsidies out and leave farmers addicted to costly chemicals and seeds and intensive water use. They don't break even, the costs rise way beyond what they can earn. And in the 80s, the farmers of Punjab, who were supposed to have been made prosperous by this industrial agriculture, were not very prosperous. And meantime, the women had been removed from farming. New forms of violence against women had started, and I've written about it in my first book called Staying Alive, where in Punjab we saw for the first time an emergence of female feticide with the rise of the Green Revolution, because women were no longer necessary for production. Men on tractors was all that was required for farming. Men who could spray pesticide, throw urea, none of that caring work of nourishing the soil, maintaining soil fertility, maintaining biodiversity, none of that, which was women's work, was necessary anymore, and women were rendered the dispensable sex. But it wasn't just violence against women, it was also violence within society. The young men started to take to guns. In that book called The Violence of the Green Revolution, I've tracked how the birth of terrorism takes place in the ground of false economies. False economies that destroy the real capital that people have, which is their ecosystems, their soil, their biodiversity, their water, their seeds, and the amazing creativity and productivity of the human mind and human hands and the human body. Once that economy is destroyed and an illusion of a prosperity is created, and interestingly, in the case of the Green Revolution, the reason it was called green was because it was supposed to avoid the Red Revolution, which was spreading from China. And bringing chemicals to the third world, bringing industrial agriculture to the third world in the name of the Green Revolution, was given a Nobel Prize, not for science. It was given a Nobel Prize for peace. But we didn't have peace. 30,000 people died in the violence of Punjab. It's usually a forgotten story about terrorism. But 30,000 innocent people were killed because an angry generation with no livelihood, no incomes, no future, no employment was left with this legacy of a violent economy. But that wasn't the only kind of violence that was built into it. You know, there's so much use of the phrase weapons of mass destruction currently with the war, and one would think it's only where Saddam Hussein was hiding them that these weapons exist. No, these weapons were created in the last big war. They were created in the Great World Wars. These weapons were then transferred to agriculture. So wherever chemical industrial farming is being done, it's being done on the basis of weapons of mass destruction. And we were shaken up to realize this fact on that terrible night in December 1984, when a Union Carbide plant leaked and killed 3,000 people instantly, 8,000 people over the next few days, and 30,000 people in the 18 years since that disaster. Right now, Carbide is owned by Dow, and I'll tell you a little about how these chemical giants have mutated into the new mutation giants of genetic engineering. They're the same. But I remember in that period of the Bhopal disaster, I flew down as soon as I could. And I just thought to myself, this is so unnecessary. We don't need to do farming with weapons of mass destruction. Indian farmers have farmed without chemicals for millennia and done it well. 100 years ago, the British, who were then ruling us, as they were ruling you, a little longer than that, they tried to send an imperial agriculturist. And the imperial agriculturist's name was Albert Howard. Howard came with all the chemicals, and his agenda was to improve Indian agriculture using chemicals. And he came But because he was a real scientist, he found there were no pests in the fields. And he threw his pesticide spray cans away. And as he says in this tremendous book, I recommend you find it and read it. If you can't find it here, write to us and we'll mail it to you. It's called The Agricultural Testament. And in the Agricultural Testament, Howard says, I threw my poisons away and I decided to ask the pests and the peasants how to do farming that does not create pests. Because he could not find pests. He could not find problems in soil fertility. Same thing, he started to learn from farmers. How do you farm without chemical fertilizers? By the way, the chemical fertilizers, like the nitrogen fertilizers, come from the explosives industry. That's where they were first designed. And that's why Oklahoma bombing was a fertilizer bomb. It went back to the original use of that product. As Rachel Carson has written in her brilliant book, Silent Spring, every pesticide used is a war chemical. Every pesticide is a war chemical. Herbicides are war chemicals. Agent Orange, sold around as a herbicide. And if you look at the names they give to the herbicides, I once had a debate with Monsanto, and again, I mean, Monsanto does everything it does to liberate us, especially the women of the third world. They never do it to make profits. No, 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 no. You got it very wrong if you think that's it. It's about freeing women like me up. And they want to free us up with spraying Roundup. But look at the names of the pesticides: Squadron, Machete, Avenge. Just pull these cans off your garden store and see the names. It is war against the biosphere. It was designed for war, it performs war, even when it's in the name of just cleaning up your lawn. I actually find lawns that have freedom of species as much more beautiful looking than these. After Albert Howard had done this learning and had had the humility to learn from those who he was sent to teach, he realized the secret of it all was humus. And humus is produced by nature. Humus can be helped by human activity. So what we really have is an economy of humus and an economy of fossil fuel. Out of the economy of fossil fuel and oil comes all the violence, because every product that fossil fuel creates violence. Right from the minute you drill that well, to the processing you do, whether you turn it into clothing or you turn it into sprays for killing pests, whatever, or the medicines or the foods you eat, we are literally right now eating oil. If you deconstruct the food you're eating, you know, the UK's Alliance of Sustainable Food Systems has done a very, very good study on how much fossil fuel is in our food. Whether it's in the transport element or in the production part of using fossil fuels. And in terms of the transport element, let me just give you a figure I got from the environment minister in Denmark when I was inaugurating a big organic fair in Denmark a few years ago. He said that for every kilogram of food traded around the world, there's 10 kilograms of CO2 put into the atmosphere, which then goes out to create more floods and more hurricanes and more droughts, undercutting your food production capacity further. So it's a vicious cycle of violence that creates artificial deprivation in situations where if we were functioning in the humus economy, you wouldn't have scarcity. Now, the humus economy is, for me, even more relevant in this time, because humus comes from the same root as humidity, which is what keeps the world going. We are, after all, water. The planet is water. Our life is based on water. It's the same root as humility. And so you can really see that moisturized soils create good, sustainable ecosystems, and moisturize societies create peace. There is basically a lack of social humus in society that is tending constantly towards conflict. It could be conflict of the kind you saw in Los Angeles in terms of the race riots, or it could be conflict of the kind that's being now fought out in the Gulf countries. But each of these is totally unnecessary because all it needed was humus being put into the picture. And as far as human relations are concerned, humus comes from that original source of humus in the earth. I have traveled a lot, I have researched a lot, I have lived a lot, and I found that in the same endowment, where people and societies and communities work and live within their means, they have peaceful societies. And where they work and live beyond their means to get someone else's share of something, you will necessarily have conflict. If as a farmer I want to rob my neighbor of their share of water, there will be a conflict. But if I know this is the rain that comes from the sky, this is the crop I should grow. If it's a 400 millimeter rain and then a 300 millimeter millet makes good sense to grow. 1,200 millimeter sugarcane doesn't make sense to grow. If I grow to the 1,200 millimeter sugarcane, I must rob from my neighbor her or his share of water, and I must rob from the future their share of water because I must mine the water. Interestingly, this kind of mining was imposed on us by the World Bank. In 1984, 84 must have been some kind of dramatic watershed in my life. You know, it's the year of the big war that killed, you know, there's people are firing from mosques right now. But the extremists in India were firing from the Gurdwara, the Golden Temple in Amritsar, and then it was attacked by Indira Gandhi, and then eventually the extremists got her, and she was assassinated that winter, very close to the Bhopal disaster. So it was a year of, you know, for me, a deep shock therapy about what are the roots of this violence and how we have to build alternatives. But in that same year, because of the drought we were having, I was asked by a government of the western state of Maharashtra to advise them on how to overcome the water scarcity. Because they were having to provide water in tankers to more and more and more villages. And they said, you know, last year we had 2,000 villages, we provided the 2,000, but this year we have 6,000 villages with no water. So can you come and tell us how to solve this water problem, how to solve the drinking water problem? But the drinking water problem was created by the 70s loans of the World Bank, where the government had asked for a little extra money to deepen wells. But the wells people needed were for drinking water, and the World Bank said, no, we'll give you much more money than you need, but you must drill tube wells, and you must shift your farming from millets to sugarcane, because millets feed people, sugarcane feeds the market. And for the World Bank, unless things go to the market, production is not happening, growth is not happening. So food scarcity was created, leading within a decade to total water famine. And the response that people made to that was tremendous, was amazing, because out of it came movements for water conservation. People started to join, to start building embankments, conserve water, to create water harvesting structures. But there was no point to build water harvesting structures and still have a few rich farmers growing sugarcane. So they started to ban in particular regions. They said, no more sugarcane. This January, I launched a national water journey of a whole year. It's the year of fresh water. But it's also the year where the big companies are trying to use the opportunity of water scarcity that was created to now say, because there's water scarcity, commodify water, privatize it, we'll bring you water. And I'll give you a few details of how that works. But both to respond to this privatization as well as to encourage the communities that are taking the solutions in their hands. We started on 1st of January with the water march, and it was led by women. It was a women and water march through the areas where people have harvested their water. And in the deserts of Rajasthan, where there has been a 4-year drought, where people have worked together as community, as collective, rivers have come alive, dead rivers that had no water. And this old farmer who was on this journey with me, 75-year-old, big turban, you know, in the Rajasthan, they wear these beautiful turbans. He puts it so humbly. He basically says, all we did was quench the thirst of the earth. We filled the earth's stomach first. And once we'd done that, the earth gave water for free to us. And I see the same issue in soil fertility, that if you feed the soil will give you food. When you think of feeding yourself or the market by starving the earth and the soil, then you kill every microorganism, you kill the earthworms, you kill everything that makes for soil fertility, and you have desertification. And you have 5-year, 6-year, 10-year, 30-year farming systems, which then keep moving to find new places to grow food.